Hi there. I'm Megan Zeilinger with Dakota County Social Services.
I'm Margie Webb with Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and I completed the counselor role in the Way to Work project.
And I'm Heather Deutschlander, and I'm from ProAct Inc., and I was the provider in this collaboration.
We are here to talk to you today about how we collaborated in order to implement person-centered planning practices and actions in order to find employment for people as part of a pilot called Way to Work. So Way to Work started in October of 2015 when we traveled down to Ohio as a group between Vocational Rehabilitation Services, 2 staff from the Department of Human Services, 2 staff from Dakota County, and a couple people from VR in order to get to know what Ohio was doing that was different than what was being done in Minnesota, how they were using person-centered planning in order to lead to an employment plan that led to customized employment outcomes for individuals with disabilities, particularly those who had been served in a segregated or sheltered setting for the last several years. So when we embarked on this, we talked a lot about what success would be to each of our partner agencies. And what we learned really quickly was that any one person getting a job, we would count as success. And the pilot has wrapped up now, and we had 124 individuals who were served at ProAct who said that they wanted competitive employment and who we are working with or have worked with to help secure a job. So we're going to talk to you about how we did that, what person-centered planning tools we used in order to do that, how it worked, and how important the collaboration of the 3 of our agencies, as well as the Department of Human Services, and the families that were involved, and the residential providers and everyone else that worked together in order to put the pieces of employment together. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what person-centered planning tools were used to connect with potential job seekers going into our pilot at the beginning.
I think that what was most important with the Way to Work and connecting with those job seekers was finding out what was important to and what was important for them. This was just basic planning principles on how to move forward. We could find interests. We could develop those bonds with our job seekers and get to know them through routines and supports and try to find that ideal job match and that ideal environment.
Our message as we started the pilot project was to say that anyone who said yes or wanted to work, we would proceed with and at least look for employment. We couldn't guarantee that everyone in the project was going to receive a job or get started in employment, but we were willing to put forth the services and try. And that would look different for each person. Some of the tools that we started with that come from the person-centered thinking approach that I used quite often with many of the individuals I worked with, I started with the relationship map where the person was at the center and said, who's important in your life and how are the different players in your life related to what was happening. And so I took a look at that first to say, who would we invite to the table to talk about employment? What supports did they have, and who would we bring to start those initial discussions? When we got people at the table, the next tool that we used was the important 2 and important 4. And it was, we had to look at the balance between what were that person's dreams, hopes, goals, and what supports would they need to make that happen. It was important to balance what the person wanted, what their interests were with, what were some of their support needs, medical needs, look at health and safety and say, how could we balance those 2 out to have something that would work for everyone, meet their needs, and they could be successful with. Some of the other tools we used in moving forward with this was, what does a good day look like? What does a bad day look like for each person? That gave us a lot of insight about what the person needed environmentally, what they needed in terms of supports around them, what the environment needed to look like for them to perform their best. The other tool that we did quite a bit of use with was, what do people like and admire about you? If we asked other people that know you really well, what would they say that you're really good at? And what would they say that you do best at? How do you function best? Describe that for us. The other tool that we use quite often was a one-page profile. We took pictures of individuals doing different things, doing tasks, and then we put together what supports the person needed, how they would function best, and what that would look like, so that we could hand that off to others on the team, and could use that tool to show others what our goal was and what we hope to get from that.
I think another important thing was just the framework of the project, and what was important was our collaboration. And I think, Megan, you have a lot to say about that, because without you, we couldn't have done a lot of the successes that we had.
Oh, thanks, Heather. Collaboration was really important in this pilot. When it first started, VR reached out to us at Dakota County to see if this was something we might be interested in. And we definitely were, because we had employment first is very much the way that we provide services in Dakota County. So it was very important that we collaborate with those that were willing, especially from a state agency standpoint. Doing a pilot like this, it wasn't really the time to work with an agency that you had to convince that individuals could work. We had to find an agency who was already on board with that, which is why we reached out to PROACT to see if they would also be involved. So collaboration throughout the pilot would have been the things that worked really well were because we were collaborating well. The areas where we struggled were because we weren't collaborating as well. So through the course of the months that we did this, there were highlights and lowlights for sure. But one trend that was definitely apparent was that we needed full team support in order to make employment happen. So employment wasn't something that was a siloed process. It went alongside housing, it went alongside community supports, it went alongside friendships and family routines and residential provider supervision needs, and all of this went together along with Social Security benefits and the work that PROACT was doing and the work that VR was doing to make sure that we could be successful with each individual. Team support, family support was instrumental in making things work, as well as us having open and honest communication when we thought somebody else wasn't pulling their weight or wasn't being creative as we needed to be or wasn't using person-centered approaches when they should. So it was very important that we called each other out on it when we saw a really negative one-page profile or a list of an individual's weaknesses or things they needed to work on prior to being successful with employment, to make sure that the job coordinator or the job developer believed in that individual, as well as the VR counselor, as well as the county case manager. We also had to collaborate really closely because funding was dependent upon having current service authorizations, having funding in place, having supports in place was very important. We didn't want to find jobs and then not have the coaching that somebody needed available. And so that became instrumental in communication and pushing things through quicker and making sure that the county was kept up to speed on what they needed to do at any given time. Do you guys have anything to add about family support and our collaboration?
I think you touched on a lot of the main elements that made it work. I think one of the basic elements, though, was our agreement that we met everybody where they were at, and we were doing one person at a time. We weren't just filling a job title or position. We wanted to look at what that person wanted and get to the job, not bringing the job to them. Mm-hmm. And so that was another important element, I thought, that we haven't covered.
Right. So why was this more person-centered than what we did before? Was something that we talked about a lot at our regular meetings. I should mention, too, that part of our collaboration was meeting every single week for, I would say, the shortest time that we ever met for weekly was probably 2 or 2.5 hours. And it was pretty frequent that we would meet for 4 hours in the afternoon to talk about each individual and figure out what needs to be done and what are you going to do and what am I going to do and what is that person going to do, and being sure that we went through a list of responsibilities and follow through items and kept each other accountable for the work that was being done So that was key to our collaboration. So part of those weekly meetings would be to talk about, well, what's already been done? What have we already tried? What worked well? What didn't work well? And what are we going to do moving forward? So PROACT is affected by the staffing shortage, just like all other organizations are. We had staff turnover among job developers. We had job developers that started and did well, and we had those that started and struggled. And so being sure that we had these person-centered planning practices in place, and we were able to coach staff as they were going along when they might not have been being super person-centered or positive with an individual was really crucial. But what else did we do that was more? Why do you think this was so much more person-centered than the things we did in the past?
We kept it positive. We had to keep that momentum going, because once you lose that momentum, you lose all that time and effort that we have done with our collaboration. So I think that was important, meeting weekly and keeping going with things. So that helped with.
And some of the key elements of being person-centered are a promise to listen. And so we did that at initial meetings. What is it that you want? What would you like to see happen? And try to pull supports for each individual around that to help make that happen. And people's lives were really complicated. There were individuals that had to move because they had no transportation source. So that would involve, finalizing a lease, getting a new place, having funds to put down deposits. So there were many issues we faced. For some, it was benefits, but we said that we would use that, we would listen to what people had to say, and the next step of that was to say, what actions can we do now? That promise to act on what people said and what people wanted, and not waiting long periods of time for things to happen. We tried a very rapid engagement model to say, you said you want to work, what can we do today, tomorrow to get that happen? And the third component of that was just being really honest with time frames to say, this is going to take 2 weeks, or this step is going to take perhaps a month for that to happen. And again, we didn't promise jobs, but at least we were being honest with the process, the steps that would occur, and following through with that. And that really helped our weekly meetings help kind of keep all of that on track and all of us in check throughout the project.
And some of the things we ran up against were, how do you continue to be person-centered in an employment process? How do we not try to take a person and plug them into a current job opening? How do we recognize early on that a job developer tends to start doing online applications instead of getting out in the community and actually meeting with real businesses and talking about skills and talking about where somebody really shines, where they thrive versus where they struggle? So being sure that each time that there was a close call with a job, that we would look at it, is this something that that person wants, or is it something we want them to take? Does this fit in well with what their conditions of employment are? And if we found things that were, for example, we had somebody who got a job as a product tester at a grocery store, and we knew it wasn't the right fit. We knew it didn't work into the employment plan. We knew that the employer's basic requirements were that somebody doesn't smoke cigarettes in the parking lot, and that this person wanted to smoke cigarettes in the parking lot. So there were these, ideal conditions of employment. There are these elements of what the person wanted in a job that were not there, yet they started this position. So it really made you go back and think, are we doing what's best for an individual in this situation? Is this best for our relationship with the employer? Is it going to teach him skills that help him make a more informed decision around employment? Or is this just going to lead to failure? So we did have to kind of constantly challenge each other to stay person-centered. Instead of thinking about how long it was since you had your last closure, or how long it's been to meet your quota for the monthly jobs. It was, well, this isn't the right fit for that person. So I think that none of it is cookie cutter easy stuff that we did. All of it was pretty challenging to hold each other accountable and to really do things differently. I wouldn't say that PROACT was the most person-centered organization going into this pilot, and I do hope that now they will continue to maintain the level of training for their staff and the practices that they have built to be more person-centered, to be sure that internally their organization is person-centered when they're providing transportation to individuals or coaching to individuals or deciding who's doing ongoing support or follow-up support on a job site for an individual, that all of these things would continue to remain person-centered instead of being agency-centered, which it's really easy to fall back into that. Do you like that?
Yes, that's good. Yeah, well, that's what got the ball rolling, is the momentum again, is once that was planted, that changed the culture, that changed a lot of big things, so.
For sure.
Yeah.
So obviously many people have heard me talk about the importance of one person, one job at a time, but are there things that really resonate with this pilot around one person, one job that you guys have to add?
I just wish we could do it for everybody. That's, I think, the thing I take away. I think that's where you're going to find the most success is through the collaboration, because it can't just be one. A person's just not one-dimensional. There's so many other elements that go into it, and I think this project showed that. If you have all that, then you'll get success with it. So,
Anything to add, Margie?
Nope.
No? Okay. Well, and VR always did one person, one job, or has for a long, long time. So, so the importance for us at the county around one person, one job is that it's just how we should be doing things. It's what we need to be doing. And what my biggest takeaway from this pilot was that people want this. People want a job of their own. If we had more time to share some of the person-centered practices that we use, we would include the person's story, because the application, in order to participate in Way to Work, included, why do you want a job? What does a job mean to you? And so many of the memorable parts of what we did were the words out of an individual's mouth once they found a job or why they wanted to look for a job. And it became really clear really early on that 124 individuals that were currently served in center or on enclaves in PROACT in Egan only said, I want a job of my own. So that means we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of people out there that want jobs. And if we don't do this one person at a time, we'll never be successful. So that's what I would say my biggest takeaway on this was. And also that no one agency can do it. If I was trying to take on person-centered practices myself as the county, I would not be nearly as successful as if I ensure that the local VR office also is doing things in a person-centered way, and that our agencies that are providing services like PROACT are also doing things in a person-centered way, and to teach families how can your IEP be done in a person-centered way, how can you advocate for your child productively and effectively, so that you get better outcomes and the outcomes that you're hoping for. So that's what my takeaway would be.
My biggest takeaway from a VR standpoint was really getting to know individuals on a much deeper level than I typically had in the past, or that we typically spend with individuals, and that related all back to the person-centered thinking and planning and the one job at a time. I got to know people on a much deeper level. The other piece of it was extremely successful. We had 32 people obtain jobs of that 124. We're continuing and still working on that. We have so many success stories, and we really got to see people transform from an original starting point to they're now working, they want more hours, they're able to go to movies and buy things, and some of them were able to move to different locations or just have more life choices. So that was a really cool part, to sit back and watch the successes and the success stories that we had.
yeah, I think the successes were more than just getting the job, but like you said, was doing that. And I think as a provider, I think what's an important takeaway is just changing that culture, getting the person-centered thinking going, and then you'll see more success that way. So.
And I think one underlying thing that we did track throughout the course of the pilot is that the change in income that an individual has after going to a job on their own. So we tracked what their monthly take-home pay was prior to getting a job, when they were working on the Enclave Run Center at PROACT, versus how much money they have now. And as much as we don't want to live in the capitalist society that we do, we do. And that's just a matter of fact. So an individual is going to be able to live a more person-centered life when they have discretionary income that they can spend doing things that they love and that they enjoy and buying things that they want to buy, and being able to have that cell phone and pay the monthly bill so they can communicate with their friends and family and move into apartments that meet their needs instead of being stuck in the traditional lower income option that they had prior. So it's been really exciting. And just to reiterate what Margie said, how many people have found jobs?
32.
32 people have found a job. We're not giving up on any of the other ones. Several of them actually just had their intake meeting into Way to Work in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So it just took that long to get through to people, but we are not taking any new applications. So we hope that someday we'll have 100 out of our 124 individuals working. We have had some pass away. We've had some retire or
their
decide
mind.
that employment isn't for them right now. So that left for a different agency. So yeah, we are still very hopeful that the person-centered practices we use will continue to find jobs for everybody else on the list and everybody else served at ProAct. Anything else to add? All right, well, thank you for listening to us.